Hello crocheters, Vitania here from the Hobbyist on the Road. Today I'm going to show you how to crochet a puff stitch in two different ways. I have crocheted two samples here, and one is with a puff stitch that's used a lot in crocheting clothes, and this one it's worked on from the back, looking at the back side. So actually we are working looking on this side but building the puff stitch on the back. Now the second one is not as puffy as the first one, and its stitches stand up straighter. You can see these are more diagonal and these stand up straighter, and this one can be used from either side. Like this is the front, but the back is identical, almost identical. It's often used in granny squares, Irish crochet motifs, where you normally work looking only at the front side of the project. So let's begin. So we'll start with this one. I'll call it variation 1 of puff stitch, and then this will be variation 2. Okay, so let's begin. So I have started crocheting the sample with the first variation of the puff stitch. So I have one row, I'll show you how to crochet the stitch in the second row, and then I'll build my sample with the second variation. Okay, so as I said, we crochet looking at the back of the work. Okay, I'll just have a single crochet here just to start, just not to have that puff stitch at the very edge. Right, so we yarn over, we go through the stitch, pull out. Now we'll go through that same stitch. For this puff stitch, I'll go through that stitch 5 times. Most people will count the number of loops on the hook, and you might have seen those videos on YouTube. I prefer to count how many times I go through that stitch, because it's just usually simpler for me, you know. So in this particular case, I'll go 5 times through the stitch, but the usual number is 3 times. Okay, so that was once. I'll yarn over, go through again twice, again the same stitch 3 times, 4 times. I sometimes hold the yarn with my thumb or the index finger just to keep it on the hook for those last 2 stitches, because it can be a bit harder, a bit tricky to put through. Okay, now to finish the puff stitch, we'll yarn over, and now we'll have to go through all of these loops on the hook, pull that yarn through. Now in order to do that successfully, we need to make sure we hold the hook correctly. Like, we shouldn't hold it up and not the sideways either, you see, because it will be hard for us to pull through. It has to be down. Okay, so I'm holding it down and I pulled it out. Now you can see the puff stitches there, but it's not puffed up nicely the way it's done on the first row. So in order to do that, we need a single crochet into the next stitch, just a single crochet. Okay, now make sure the single crochet is tight. Don't pull it out like you did in the puff stitch, just make it tight. And there you've got your first puff stitch. It's nicely puffed up on the other side, and you can see it's kind of flat here on the back side. Let's do another one. Yarn over, go through the stitch once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and 5 times, right? Wiggle your hook a bit, yarn over and go through all of the loops and single crochet into the next stitch. Make sure you keep it tight. See? And that's your front, nicely puffed up stitch. Okay, I'll demonstrate one more. Yarn over once, twice, 3 times, 4 and 5. Oops, you see I dropped one. Make sure you don't drop any. Wiggle it a bit. Okay, yarn over and pull through all of the loops and single crochet into the next stitch. A tight single crochet. Okay, here's what we've got. Let's do one more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yarn over, pull through all of the loops and single crochet into next one. Tight single crochet. I'll just do 2 single crochet here to finish this row because I don't want a puff stitch at the very edge. And anyway, it's only a sample. I'll chain 2 here. Okay, so here's what we've got. We have 2 rows of very nice puff stitches. Now that was our variation 1. Now we'll look at variation 2. Okay, now what I'll do first, I'll just go with single crochets all along. So I should have just done 1 chain here. I'll just crochet with single crochets here just to have that separating row, and I'll get back to you once I'm ready to do the variation 2 of the puff stitches. So I'm here at the back of the single crochet row, and I chained 2 here at the end. This is because the second variation, the stitch is standing up straighter and it's a slightly taller stitch, so I just needed 2 chains here. I'll do, okay, no, I'll start right. So now the way we build the second variation, we start exactly the way as we started with the first one. We'll yarn over and we'll go 5 times through the same stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we yarn over and pull through the way we did before. Now the only difference is how we finish. We yarn over and we chain on top of the stitch. And as you can see already, it's puffed up here on this side, and it looks the same on the front side as well. Now it's important that this chain, it counts as a stitch, and it corresponds to the stitch nearby. So say for example, if you want the effect to have your puff stitches next to each other, so what you need to do, you need to skip one and you have to go with the next puff into the next one, because as I said, this corresponds to the chain on top. Okay, we'll yarn over, we skip one and we'll go to the next one. Pull out once, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, as we did before, go through all of the loops and chain 1 on top to finish. You can see our puff stitches are close to one another. You almost can't see that stitch between them, and yet there is a nice kind of you can see that these 2 puff stitches are separate stitches. Let's do it once more. As I said, we skip one and we crochet a puff into the next one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yarn over, pull through all loops, yarn over, chain to finish your stitch up on top. And as you can see already, you see the back of it is the same as the front. Okay, if we are very strict, the front is slightly puffier than the back, but the difference is minimal. Okay, so let us finish this row, and then I'll just point out a few important details. So skip one and do a puff into the next one. 2, 3, 4, 5. Pull through and chain on top of the stitch. And will we do one more, or will we just leave it here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, leave it here. Now, if you need other stitches next to this one, you will need a double crochet, that's American terminology, next to it, because as you can see, this stitch is standing up taller. It's a taller stitch. So I'll just do double crochet here, just to finish the row. I'm not making anything in particular, this is just for demonstration purposes. And I'll just, to finish this stitch, I'll just do a row of single crochets, and you'll see once you crochet another row on top, it kind of, the stitch is pulled up a slight bit taller, and it looks slightly different from the first variation. Very quickly, some stitches there, but you see what we've got. So especially when I crocheted one row on top, this stitch became even taller and straighter, whereas this one is diagonal. So now why would you need two variations? Sometimes, like for example, if you're crocheting a sweater, most likely you'll use that first one because you can crochet from the back. But say for example, if you're crocheting a granny square or a motif for Irish crochet project, you're crocheting looking at the good side of the work, so you will use that second variation. And also one last thing is to note how it is marked in charts and patterns. So very quickly, let's see. So usually this stitch is marked, both are the same, marked the same. So I don't know, can you see? Like this. And then in the pattern it would say 3 half double crochet puff. Okay, so in this case it's 3 half double crochet puff. In our case that I showed you, I was doing 5 half double crochet puff. Like I went through that stitch 5 times. Presumably the 5 one would be marked like this, with 5 lines here, 5 semicircles, but I'm not sure 100% whether they would mark it like this or whether they would just mark this one and say 5 here. Now another way I've seen this the puff stitch marked, especially in handwritten charts, is a simple squiggle like this. So if you see something like this, most likely, almost 100%, that's a puff stitch. How many times you have to go through the stitch, you'd have to work it out yourself. In most cases, we are talking about 3 half double crochet, meaning going through the stitch 3 times. Today I wanted my stitch to be puffier, so I went 5 times through it. So this was Vitania from the Hobbyist on the Road, and I hope you enjoyed this small lesson on how to crochet 2 variations of puff stitch. Have a nice day.